Welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Space. Today we have with us John Schrey, a dedicated veteran and strong survivor who lives by the Marine Corps motto, Semper Fidelis, which means always faithful. He joined the Marines in 2006 at age 25 and served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat engineer. Despite facing intense combat and deep loss, his commitment to his mission and comrades never weakened. When he returned home, Schrey battled PTSD and addiction, leading to homelessness. With the strong support of his wife, daughter, and 12-step fellowship, he overcame these challenges. Now clean and sober for over 5 years, he works at a recovery center, creating programs to help other veterans facing similar struggles. All right, we'll dive into it. How are you today?
Doing good. How
Good.
are
Thank
you?
you for coming and sharing your story. So let's start from the beginning.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit more about your early life and what led you into the Marine Corps at 25.
Well, to start kind of at the beginning and go briefly through, I was raised in a house with two older brothers that were 13 and 15 years older than me. I was born in 81, so both of my brothers were severely addicted to drugs and alcohol from my first kind of recollection. So I always had this idea of, I grew up in South Florida in the 80s and 90s. It was a wild time, and I saw what I didn't even know drugs, alcohol, didn't know the difference, but I saw what it did to my family. It tore my family apart for a long time, and I always said I would never become that. Whatever that was, I wasn't going to become that.
Yeah.
Um, and fast forward through the years, I became just that. So by the time, my early 20s, I'd sputtered out of college numerous times. And I was pretty much already strung out on opiates. And the walls were closing in on me. I had a couple different drug charges up in New York City from trying to go up there and get my life together because one of my brothers was actually clean up there. And
Okay.
and just the walls were closing in, and so my buddies, it's a kind of wild story. It's almost like it sounds like it's BS, but like my buddy's little brother was getting out of the Marines at the time, and he and I were using together, and it was just like, well, why don't we join the Marines? And it was like, I'll do it if you do it. And but all based on the fact that I knew my days were numbered. I was going to end up
Okay.
in jail, or my other brother was locked up in the penitentiary. So I knew I was on my way there, and literally within a couple months, I was in boot camp at 25 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is a wild ride.
yeah,
So it was just two friends being like, I'll do it if you do it.
literally, yeah, like verbatim. That was the
Okay.
conversation.
How did you think? I mean, you're telling me that when you were younger, you almost thought you didn't want to be like your brother. What do you
Right.
think was a turning point that made you cross that line?
Um, I think even far after the Marine Corps, I always kind of thought I started doing this thing where like I'd stay one tier below what they were doing. If as I started to learn about different drugs and stuff, oh, they're doing cocaine. I can smoke weed and drink alcohol. It was always kind of like this idea that like I'm not as bad as them.
Okay.
And it just kind of, now my brother's shooting heroin. Like, oh, I can do. It was just this mentality that like I'm still not as bad as them yet. And
Okay.
and I'm an addict. That's what it comes down to. And I didn't understand what that was. And so I thought I could just dabble, and slowly, I had these lines in the sand that I just kept crossing
Yeah.
until I was out of control too.
Now, at that stage, what do you think were the biggest mental challenges you faced once you were in the boot camp?
Um, so going into boot camp, I did kind of kick opiates. I tried to wean myself down, and people I think that's just like crazy. But the fact is, like in boot camp, you're constantly moving, you're constantly, and it was actually probably the best way to kick opiates. But it was it was a daily. Even after the opiates were out of my system, it was the Marine Corps 13-week boot camp, so it's
Okay.
about double the length of the other services, and it was a daily. It was a mental just beat down. I mean, that's the goal. And when you go to boot camp, is they say they want to break you down to build you back
Yeah.
up, and
Okay.
then that's exactly what they did. It was not. I don't remember, except for some of the runs, physical, exertion, but the mental breakdown and the things they would do. That like it
That was
was
wild.
yeah, it was wild.
Wow, give us an example. What's one that you remember vividly?
I mean, just like stuff that you would sit there and do. Like, for instance, if someone you all got dressed at the same time, like
Mm.
everyone, all 100 or 96, I think we had were online, two lines looking at each other, and you got to get dressed as the drill instructor tells you to put one sock on, one sock, and if one person moves slow, it'd be like take your sock off, and then you would do that for an hour and a half, 2 hours. You would just like
Everybody just had to
just
be on the same time.
repetition and just complete it was, yeah, to the point you really just don't even know what's going like now there's a method to it, and I found out later, it's
Okay.
all about the mind and like being able to put up with stressful environments because that you're getting screamed at the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, just things like that, like the
Uh,
repetition of things, and just like it was
Now, I'm sure now you laugh at it, but
yeah.
back then,
Oh yeah, I mean back then some people went crazy, you know what I mean, and that's probably who they were trying to wean out, the
mm,
people who couldn't handle it, and you'd start fighting with each other, and it was like I think that was the mentality too, is like who's going to start fighting with each other, who's going to kind of join up and
mm,
help the other guy.
yeah. Well, obviously you made it. Did your friend make it?
He, my friend did make it, and then he got
Okay.
kicked out right after that for getting high.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So
hmm
after you went through that process of the boot camp, that what came next to you?
Yeah. So I got out of boot camp. You go on 10 days of leave. Um, you get to go home for 10 days. I went home and I went right back to partying, just like my friend did. I actually missed the flight to go back to combat training. He
Mm,
made it. He got drug tested, shipped out.
wow.
I got back a day late, missed the drug test, had a week to get the drugs out of my system, and I was able to carry on.
Okay.
And from then I really took it. I started to see when I went to combat training, like I started to feel like a Marine and kind of get into like what I love to this day about it, and the purpose and kind of the camaraderie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I started to really still drink and drug whenever I could,
Yeah.
drinking all the time. It's almost like a badge of courage to drink, all night and then be ready to run in the morning.
Yeah.
But I really embraced, being a Marine and
Yeah.
what it stood for.
How long were you in the Marines for?
8 years.
8 years. Okay. At what point do you feel that, well, you got diagnosed with PTSD? Fast forward.
Sure.
At what point, or did you think you started seeing the symptoms of PTSD and why?
Hmm. That's I think PTSD is different for everybody. I think it's kind of like painting with a broad brush to say PTSD. I went to combat twice. Um, I saw a lot of things. Um, I'm pretty open about it because I think people need, sometimes we're taught not to share about these things, but I swept for IEDs with a metal detector, and so when one of our guys would get hit with an IED and implemented explosive device like a pressure plate, we'd have to sweep up to them, and a lot of times they'd be missing a leg, they'd be some, couple, no longer with us, and in
Mhm.
different pieces, and so all of that I say, sometimes that people have PTSD over seeing that. For me, that was part of the job. That was like this mentality, and I had learned to create this
Like a barrier.
switch that you turn off, and it's no longer, even though it was like my brother, one of my Marines, like it's not even like a human, it's like just part of the job, and then we have to continue on.
Okay.
um and I was so that's the PTSD for me, right? It's not the young man that passed away or seeing the Taliban that we shot, picking up their like their bodies or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the mentality to get into those situations that
Mm.
has really been my biggest hurdle, or when I got out that I really struggled with, is I had this numbness, I had this ability to just not feel anything. And
Okay.
that kind of, when I came back, um,
Kind of backfired.
it backfired, but it just seeped into my private life, into my personal life, right? It
Mm.
seeped into my relationship with my wife. My
Okay.
little girl was born. I was so numb to it. Now I was already using substances as well to cope. So it was kind of like a double
Yeah.
whammy. Um, but see, I didn't notice this. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like you say, when's the first time you noticed? I'm sure
Yeah.
everyone else around me did,
Yeah.
but I kept it so inside, they may not have either.
Mm.
Looking back and all the work I've done, now I can see that like it probably is the minute I came back from deployment, um,
There were
because that
some.
switch had been turned off and
Yeah.
There was no turning it back on.
At what point did you accept that you had mental health diagnosis? Was it when it was told to you, or even before, or maybe after? It took you some time to accept it?
I mean, it's probably still hard. It's still hard for me to say, it's still hard for me because we have this idea that we have to like, it's weakness, that PTSD. It's kind of
Yeah.
why I like doing things like this. 'Cause we have this idea that like, I don't have PTSD, like it's my job. And it's like, but no, we do.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a
I,
stigma surrounding, I think, any mental health disorder, to be honest.
yeah. And the thing is too, like, you don't know what you have while you're in it. You know what I mean? You don't know what's going on with you. Um, but yeah, I think so. I think I used it as a crutch too, right? When I got out of the Marine Corps and I was doing the things I was doing and I started getting into the drugs and I would go home to my house and I had a great life. I got out, I had a house, my wife is an amazing woman. I had a beautiful, healthy little baby girl. And it was the most uncomfortable I've ever been walking into that environment, because I was used to chaos and I also was kind of numb to any type of feelings to include love and emotions.
Yeah.
So I felt shame over that. And that's what I felt. That was the first time I realized, like, I feel like a robot. I feel like a piece of shit,
Okay.
and I think that was like kind of the understanding. And my way of coping with that was to leave the house.
Mm.
And that's how I became homeless.
Okay.
I didn't lose my house. I gave my house away. I gave my wife and daughter away. I gave all that away to go to be homeless. I felt
Yeah.
more comfortable in the, running and gunning in the street, using and getting the means to get drugs and alcohol.
Because that's what you knew how to do
That's what I knew how
best.
to, and I knew how to operate in that mentality. It
Yeah.
was life or death, just like we were used to overseas. And again, even when that was going on, I didn't know that that's why I was gravitating towards that. But now I know that's why I was so comfortable in that environment. A lot of us are so comfortable in that environment because I know I'm not alone.
Okay.
Um,
So at that point in your life, what was really going on through your head? Like to make a decision like that to kind of just leave your house, your wife, your daughter.
I had a really good career. I spent 8 years in the Marine Corps. I got some really nice medals, right? Some nice like they give you these V's for valor for things
Hmm.
that happen in combat, right? That my mom and dad were very proud of. My wife was very proud of. I was proud of at one point. And my idea, what was going through my head, to be quite honest with you, is like, I'm never gonna stop getting high and using. Because I'm never gonna be okay.
Okay.
And so if I leave them alone, hopefully I can just use till I die on the streets. And before my daughter's old enough, she'll
Mm.
be able to see her dad with his little ribbons and hear the stories of him in combat from his other Marines that knew my family and my mom and dad. And she'll be able to be proud of her dad, as opposed to what I thought if I lived, I was going to be in and out like I had been.
Okay.
Psych ward, treatment, come home, steal something from the house, go back out. And then my daughter would get old enough to see what a scumbag junkie her dad was.
Okay.
So if I just left and never came back, she could hear
Yeah.
the stories about how I used to be.
All right.
And that seemed okay for me. you know? Yeah.
What made you get out of the streets? What made you actually go out and seek help? Was there a turning point
Yeah.
event?
Well, there's one event, and again, I went to treatment like 12 times, right? The VA would put me in treatment, they put me in a psych ward, and then I'd try and I wouldn't do any of the work. I'm a
Okay.
big 12-step guy, as I mentioned to you. I found a 12-step fellowship. I had been to thousands of AA meetings since I was 17 due to the courts and everything else, and never really listened to the message.
Okay.
And so one of my brothers ended up passing away in 2017
Mm.
of an overdose when he and I were both living on the streets in Miami. My other brother had maybe 10, 12 years at the time, so clean and sober. In my mentality, chose I was going to be like my brother who died.
Okay.
That was going to be, but in the back of my mind, there were a couple things. I didn't want my dad to have to bury another son. So I had a resentment really that my brother got to die first, if I'm being honest, when I started doing my 12
Yeah.
steps and things. I had a resentment against him. My daughter I knew she deserved a father. I didn't deserve her, but she deserved me.
Okay.
So those things were always playing in the back of my head. And then the final thing that kind of brought me to like give this recovery a real shot was I was sitting in an abandoned, building with no power. I
Hmm.
was in Texas at the time. It's a long story, right?
I was like, wait,
Yeah,
Miami, Texas.
I'm in
Okay.
Austin, Texas.
That's
Um,
another episode.
yeah, yeah. And I was, and I don't mean to be too graphic, some people, but it's just the truth. Like I was looking for a vein for
Hmm.
like 2 hours. I was trying to, because that's all I ever knew. Even if I knew for a couple seconds, once I hit that vein, everything would stop and I'd be okay.
Yeah.
And something came over me, and I had been in that position maybe 100, 200 times before. But something came over me, and it was just like this mental, this like moment of like, it's not going to work. It wasn't like God talking to me or anything. I think it was a moment of, from a higher power, but it was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to find a vein and I'm still not going to be okay.
Okay.
And that was really the turning point. It was kind of like this switch got flipped. And I said, I called the guy that had helped me. He's like a big brother to me to this day.
Mm.
He had a nonprofit in the hills of Austin. And I
Okay.
called him immediately, and it took a couple days, and I continued to use. And he finally got me in, and I kind of got into that facility, and I never looked back.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So you had been in facilities before, support programs, and really what I'm hearing is that what made you switch was your own self. You flipping the script.
Yeah. I would say God told
Okay.
me, yeah, or my concept of a higher power,
Okay.
because definitely like that couldn't have been me, because as I've told you, my mentality is to use until I die. If it were up to me, that's what I would have done. But
Yeah.
something intervened and made me think of, well, it's not going to work. So let's try this. But yeah, it
Okay.
wasn't, it wasn't like it wasn't like some, dramatic experience,
Yeah.
someone dying or, you know what I mean? All those things. I'd stepped over bodies. I've watched people die in front of me. I've done all that. It was that
Mm-hmm.
one mentality. And it was the truth that like drugs and alcohol were my solution for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew no other solution. And I
Yeah.
realized that they were no longer the solution. And
Yeah.
I had heard through my brother and through these other people that maybe, the program can work. And
Of
so I said,
course.
well, now I got to give it a shot.
Yeah.
You know?
So then at this point, you gave it a shot, you changed your narrative, and now you were all in.
Yeah.
How was that feeling? To feel that like something actually worked.
Well, first of all, I was dope sick for like, you know what I mean? So I wasn't,
Well, yeah.
yeah, but like, no, but like that's the mentality. I'm like, and then you're like, you have to get through that. And then the clarity starts coming in. And what happened when I went to that nonprofit, I think is what you're asking about. When I got to that nonprofit and I had that mentality, like I'm going to really give this a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I had someone come in and get me after I'd been sleeping for a couple of days and bring me out to go eat with the guys. It was an all male facility, and like which is
Okay.
also good because part of my story is like getting involved in the wrong things in treatment, right? Doing
Yeah.
everything but the right thing. But I got with these guys and we had breakfast, and for the sake of time, I'll just fast forward 3 days later, 4 days later. There's a guy who's sleeping because downstairs is like the detox room, right?
Okay.
And there's a guy sleeping, and I went and I got him like someone had done for me, right?
Okay.
Because that meant a lot to me for some reason that time, but it resonated with me. So I went and I got that guy and I brought him out and I said, come eat with us real quick. You've been there for 3 days. And he came out and maybe a week later, his name was John as well, John Lopez. And a week later, he came up to me. He's like, thanks for coming and getting me, man. I was thinking about jumping out that window and like,
Oh.
taking off, not like it was on the first floor, but, jumping out and like running and never
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
back. And that was another one of those moments like I had in that abandoned building. It was like this, wait a minute, that's what they've been telling me all this time.
Mm.
Like just doing what someone did for me, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I did it. And there, look what it did for him. And I started to really just have these, I think because I was ready to hear the message, I started to really understand that like a big thing for me and for us, military and others, of course, but speaking for my people, is the sense of purpose that we lose. That's another
Yeah.
thing when we talk about
You come
PTSD.
back into the regular
Right.
society.
My first deployment, I was led by men that taught me how to survive, purpose. My second deployment, I was leading men and I had to teach them how to survive. They're my little brothers. To this day, I love them with all my heart. We stay in touch. The purpose was overwhelming. No one talks about purpose when you're there. You don't even know what that word, you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
word, it's not even a word you use. But I started to realize that like that's so when I was drinking and drugging in the Marine Corps, I had that purpose, so it kept me afloat. When
Okay.
that purpose went away and the drinking and drugging continued, is when I really took a turn for the worst.
Yeah.
And what I realized in that little 12-man facility was that I could find purpose in recovery. That like we were in the same fight, really,
Yeah.
that may sound a little cliche or dramatic, but we are in a fight for our life,
Mm.
and we are able to find purpose in helping the next guy, and that's all we did there. We helped each other, and I worked steps, and I dove like I said, head first into the work. I got through my resentments. I did all the things that I needed to do,
Okay.
you know, and life just started to come back.
What do you think was the most impactful or beneficial for you? That servicing for others, or therapy, or the facilities you were in? Maybe a combination.
Yeah, I think there was things from each facility. I mean, I went to some really good facilities that were really good if I was willing to hear it.
Mm.
And so that's one of the things that and what I, today, like what I try and do is like, how do we reach the person to get them to be open? Because you can give them the best therapy in the world. You can give them the best experience, the best food, the best this, the best. If they're not willing to hear the message, it's falling on deaf ears. Now you can plant seeds, right? Which were planted in me.
Mm.
But if you really want them to change, first of all, I think you have to give them some hope, right? That there is a possibility. Because why would I do, why would I go through being dope sick? Why would I do a 4-step where I have to like relive basically all these things that have gone on in my life if I don't have the hope that it's going to do something? There has to be
A little hope.
yeah. And that's what I found, um, well, in the program and at this facility. And I think that that's something that we can do better, you know,
Yeah.
as a society. And then when we come to treatment, like what we're working with here is like, how do we reach them? That's what we have to figure out.
Yeah.
You can get, again, that's where it all has to start.
Have you found an answer?
I think people, authenticity.
Okay.
I think that's like, like not just the normal cookie cutter BS, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I think it definitely helps that a lot of the people that worked um, in fields like yours have been through the same thing. So
yeah,
just telling your story, saying, "Hey, I've been there," makes a big difference
right,
compared to me coming and be like, "Yeah, I'm a therapist, but I've never been in the position you've been."
right.
So
And that's the thing, right? It would be me telling a guy that you as a therapist helped me. That gives credibility to,
okay, of course.
my therapist that has been, I have a great therapist now. He's at the VA. He was never to combat, so we're completely different in what we did in the military. So, but he knows how to reach me. My therapist that when I got sober, she never been in the military at all, but she knew how to push me. She knew how to,
Okay.
and I respected her. She didn't tiptoe around things. But yeah, but I would have never been willing to listen to her if I hadn't heard other, people, like-minded people that were able to fix themselves.
Yeah. So it takes a whole team. Joe's
100%.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about support system? I know you mentioned your wife,
Yeah.
your daughter. Um, it's really hard for family members that have other family members struggling with
hmm
addiction. What can you say about that?
Well, my wife left me. Well, I left the house. She divorced me because of my transgressions and things of that nature. And she left the state, and I needed to sign paperwork to let my daughter leave the state. And I signed it. I knew, like I said before, I knew I was no good for that little girl. And she took off. But the one thing she never did is she never held my daughter against me.
Okay.
She was always there. Like, and when I finally did start, putting some months together for the first time, she allowed me like small little like FaceTimes with my kid. She allowed me this. She said, you can come up and visit.
Okay.
Until finally, when I had like a year sober, she said, you need to come be a father and start helping parents. So I moved up there, and one day a week I would be with my daughter, and slowly but surely, um, and long story short, um, we were divorced for 6.5 years. And after me being up there and doing the right thing, not trying to manipulate her, not trying to
Mm,
manipulate my kid or my mom, my family, just doing the
yeah.
right thing, um, I got, we got back together. So we've
Oh,
been back together for just over 2 years now.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
So I mean, my story is not like a lot of people's. Like
Yeah, but I mean,
but I think yeah. But
it's okay to talk about the good
yeah,
too.
and she went to therapy too, and she learned about this disease, and I think a lot of it is like it's not the PTSD for sure isn't personal, but the things that we do when we put a drink or drug in our body are not
Hmm.
who we are either.
Yeah.
And I think like not taking it personal is really important, for people,
Mm.
for the families,
Yeah.
to understand that this isn't personal. Not that it's okay or that it should be,
Yeah.
the
Allowed.
behavior. And then I think the other side of that is like not enabling.
Mm.
The best thing that ever happened to me is everyone turning their back on me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest decision for families to cut people off.
Yeah.
Because then internally you feel horrible, you want to help, but then you have to realize that it's whatever they want. You can't
Yeah.
help somebody that doesn't want to be helped.
Yeah.
So you are saying that was the best thing for you.
100%. And it's like if what you give someone $20, especially in this day and age, like in that kill, they die.
Mm,
So how is that helping them? They're gonna
mm,
they're gonna get it one way or another. There
yeah.
was nothing my family could do to stop me.
Okay.
You could put a GPS on my phone, I'll figure out a way around it. You could take all my money, then I'll just go do more, dangerous things to get the money. There was nothing. It was like, but one thing that, and I would say this: when they didn't turn their back on me. They said no more. Right? They
Okay.
said no more. We're not doing this anymore. Like we love you, and I think that's the most important is to understand. If you have someone that's out there, is like let them know we love you. We love you enough that we're not going to be a part of this anymore. And
Okay.
then that's not going to be understood right away. But like, boy, do I understand why they did it now, and I'm so grateful they did.
Yeah.
You know.
How I know previously you spoke about the emotional numbness.
Mm-hmm.
How did you overcome that?
Um, because I started to understand that we create that numbness for survival overseas, or if we're in an abusive relationship, or if we come from a bad neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Because I've
Yeah.
learned that through this process. It's not
Mhm.
just
No.
combat, but like I said earlier, like I was able to numb myself or to turn that emotional switch off because it was survival. You can't look down and worry about this person that's already died when you have to keep going and there's the
Hmm.
enemy, there's
Yeah.
danger in front of you. And so I realized that in order for me to survive now,
Mm.
it's it's
It was the
it's been
opposite.
flipped on its head.
Mm.
Like I have to be able to feel these emotions, and it's not easy. My best friend, one of my closest friends, just passed away. I mean,
Mm.
Monday.
Sorry for your
Um,
loss.
and so I'm going through that now. Like because part of me is just like like keep going, like don't And I went out to
Mm.
breakfast with his son today. His son's 16.
Oh my God.
And I'm sitting here telling his son the things that I'm telling myself, which is like feel your feelings.
Okay.
It's vital. And so that I think to answer your question, I started to understand that like the same thing that kept me alive before will kill me now.
Hmm.
And that's to block out and not
Yeah.
feel that. And now, I mean, I'm far enough away. I love my kid. You know what I mean? I have a great life with my wife. Like
Yeah.
we're moving, like my life is so good right now. So
That's
it's easy
amazing.
now,
Okay.
to feel those feelings. And I
Excellent.
know my truth is that it all started when I started to let those things come those
Okay.
feelings in,
To
good or
allow
bad.
yourself to just feel
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Right.
Okay. What advice would you have for veterans that might, have PTSD or might feel the numbness that you're talking about?
I always get asked that question. It's like, again, that's why I still have a hard time. Like some people like to war story and talk about things, and it's like like what, maybe you shouldn't be talking about that. But I think it's important. Like open your mouth. Like we
Mm,
need to know. Like also, and not to make this too like my two best friends in the Marine Corps. There was a group of 5 of us that came in
mhm,
together. We came through the ranks. We went to deploy together, and 2 of them have taken their lives
mm.
with self-inflicted gunshots. Nothing, you know what I mean? Like
Okay.
hardened Marine, tough guys. I mean, and these two, literally more than others, would do anything when we were in combat. They were down for whatever, and they
Okay.
were as tough as they come. And that toughness got them killed, right? They wanted to
Yeah.
kill the enemy. The enemy was inside. They didn't think one of them we knew was struggling. The other one didn't even know. He just went out back and boom.
Mm.
And so my first and almost my only, like, I guess, advice, or I'm begging is, and we are begging is, like, we need to know. We need to know something's wrong.
Okay.
You know, you don't have to like cry to the, on social media, but like raise your hand, call somebody,
Yeah.
because we can't do anything if we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it starts. Is like, and then two is like those of us that have recovered, and unfortunately, it's kind of why I've done pretty well in my career, because there's not too many of us
Okay.
that have struggled with the substance abuse, with the PTSD, and we do it till the bitter end.
And you're willing to come speak about, and
I feel like I have to, because that's the only.
that's your purpose now.
Yeah, because if no one had done it for me, if I hadn't heard someone else tell the story, and it's not always a guy from combat, but like, like someone that had like-minded thoughts and that had the same
Mm.
kind of things going on in their life, like, I would have never thought it was possible to even try,
Yeah.
you know?
Especially when you come back into a community where nobody has mental health disorders, and then
Right.
to meet a community that have gone through the same struggles as you and have the same diagnosis, then that can give you a sense of, well, the community you had back in the day is different, but same.
100%.
Yeah.
For sure.
How has your journey in mental health and recovery shaped your personal growth now reflecting on it?
Mm, I don't, I, I'm only where I am because of what I've been through.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to answer that question. I don't, I embrace everything that's happened to me. Like, my wife and we thought we were happy prior to, like, before the things got really bad, when I was still in the Marine Corps, and we were still, we had a nice, we had a decent life. We were drinking, my wife has stopped drinking. Right before we got back together, she stopped drinking. She's not an alcoholic or a drug addict like me, but she was drinking because of her depression. So
Okay.
seeing how my life had been, or how I had been living my life, turned her life, made her, and
Okay.
she made the decision. And it's just, across the board, everything is better now than it ever was before. Because I think, again, that life or death mentality, that, like, the idea, I have to address these things. Like, I don't have the ability, or we don't have the ability to go through to not address it,
Yeah.
because I refuse to go back. Like,
Okay.
I refuse to. And that's
Yeah.
only because I know where it takes me. Whereas before it was just kind of like, oh, don't worry about that, or, like, wipe that one under the rug, or this
Mm-hmm.
dishonesty, and then it just snowballs.
Okay.
I don't have that. I won't make it.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience, maybe in regards to your program or, um, again, things you've gone through, any advice? Maybe instead of a family member, now you can talk directly to someone who might be relating with your personal story.
Yeah. It all starts with ask for help. It all starts with that. It all starts with, find some sort of fellowship, find some sort of support group.
Okay.
Um, Again, I go to, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I say it, but I don't care if anyone ever comes to a meeting, but I do say that you got to find something. We can't do this alone. I
Mhm.
wouldn't jump out of a, I can take back 2008. There's a bunch of us in a trench, right? Like, I'm not going to jump out and fight the Taliban by myself.
Mhm.
But if we're all there together and we assault the enemy, we have a much better chance of winning.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in recovery.
Okay.
We got to know. We got to do it in There's strength in numbers, um, and we're willing to help you. I know that this will be put out. Call.
Yeah.
Just call. Send a message.
Yeah.
Like, give us a chance to, like, show you what's possible.
Yeah. Or at least plant the seed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly. I mean, hopefully we're planting the seed now, and then
That's
and
true.
then they call.
That's
It's
true.
it's not easy, but it's, when you really want it, when you have that hope, it's not that hard either.
Mm.
Or it's not as hard as what was going on. Because let me
Yeah.
tell you, it's hot outside right now, and I remember
It's so
peeling my
hard.
socks off,
Oh,
and
wow.
having, being homeless and having nothing. That's
Yeah.
hard.
I always say choose your heart right? It's going to
Good.
be hard to be
Yeah,
on the streets. It's going to be hard to go through recovery. You just got to choose your heart. Yeah.
that's a good one.
I use it a lot for couples therapy, but I'll let you use it for
Nice.
recovery.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. It's good
I was
across
like,
the board.
divorce or work on your relationship?
Yeah. Right. One doesn't
They're
stay
both
hard. The other one
hard.
just it goes. Yeah.
What about for someone that may be struggling with PTSD? Do you have any advice on how to manage, handle, overcome?
Um, be open to help. Again, it really it's
Mm,
very that simple. It really is that simple. It's like you have to be open to it. You have to be
mhm.
open to something else working. It depends on what like I said, like a lot of my PTSD is like was the lack of purpose, the lack of fellowship, that the camaraderie.
Mm,
And then of course the chaos. And you got to learn how to not be comfortable in chaos because
yeah,
like we're not at war anymore,
yeah.
or if you're in an abusive relationship and you're not in a relationship anymore, like you got to learn how to, or else you're going to kind of seek that out. Just like
Hmm.
I was seeking out
It's like the
the
pattern.
street. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's just being open because there's so many ways. There's so many ways to get better, and they don't work for everybody for sure.
Hmm.
EMDR is a great modality. It didn't work for me,
Okay.
right? But I've
Yeah.
seen it work for people. I'm a big proponent of it because I've seen it work.
Yeah.
So you don't know until you try.
Well, last question. Is there any type of mindfulness practice that you do on a daily basis? Any type of breathing or exercise? Like what helps you stay mindful?
Yeah. I go to the gym every day. I don't, it has nothing to do. I mean, obviously, I would like to look good, to feel good, but like I go to the gym, it's my quiet time. I have my headphones on. I sit quietly in the morning. I try not to be on social media right
Yeah.
away. At
Yeah.
night, I say the same prayer I've been saying since I was in combat. And I just try and put my thought. I'm such a big believer in energy.
Mm,
Whatever,
same.
positive and negative energy, like I think
Mm,
that's where God lies, or whatever your higher powers call it. I think it's, and so I just try and be positive, man. I don't, negativity is just the worst. It just permeates everything.
yeah.
So that's what I do. I do try and meditate. I'm not the best at it. My brain's still,
You don't have
you
to be
know,
the best at
yeah,
it. Yeah. You can do guided meditation
yeah.
too. Some people just think it's like sitting quietly in a corner.
No,
It's like,
never gonna
no.
happen. Never gonna happen.
Yeah. You're like, not
But
me.
I can tell you what, I'll be in the gym just to myself, and next thing I know, I don't even know, an hour's gone by,
Well,
you know?
yeah.
So
Exercise is a great way.
it's great.
So, well, I
Mhm.
love it. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing your
Thanks for having me.
story. It was very insightful. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, guys, thank you for watching or listening. If you liked what you see, leave us a comment, let us know your thoughts. And yeah, we're here to help. Please don't be afraid to reach out. See you next week.